Welcome to Changing the Game, where we share leadership insights and inspiration from female professionals who are making a difference in their industry.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Duren. Today, we welcome Caroline Neal, manager at Grant Thornton Advisors. Caroline was an elite swimmer at Florida State University, qualifying for the Olympic trials during her successful career. So cool. After earning her bachelor's and MBA at Florida State, Caroline went on to work in the athletic department at South Carolina, helping student athletes prepare to embark in their own professional journeys. Outside of her current gig, Caroline hosts her very own podcast titled Unwritten, where she shares inspiring stories and has authentic conversations with her guests. Welcome, Caroline.
Thanks, Jordan. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. For everyone listening, Caroline and I met at the Post Summit last October. One of the best days of my professional career, honestly.
Absolutely.
I didn't know anyone there. I was actually a guest of so gracious of Ashlyn Ramsey extended an invite to me. And JR, my CEO and founder, was speaking at the event. So just kind of tagged along and we had the opportunity to meet. And I'm so glad we did.
Me too. Honestly, I had no idea what to expect at that event. But even after the first day, I knew that it was completely worthwhile between the people that I met and just the experiences and the opportunities to learn. And we crossed paths, which I'm just incredibly grateful for that.
Me too. Was that your first Post Summit?
It was. Yes, I've barely been a member for a year, and I just cannot say better things about the organization.
Yeah, a lot of amazing people, honestly. Just that one day, I feel like I've still stayed in contact or just at least connected on LinkedIn with a lot of people that were there, and they share amazing insights. So anyone listening, look into the post. It's a really cool organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So Caroline, I'd love if you could kick us off and give us the backstory. So you were an elite swimmer at Florida State. Set the stage for us. I guess, what were you like growing up? What were maybe some characteristics about yourself that really shaped you as an athlete?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. And, even thinking about that, a lot of who I was when I was younger, I think reflects a lot of who I am today. One of the key things that I think defines me when I was little is I was incredibly observant. I had 3 younger brothers who were always the stars of the show, doing whatever they were doing. And I was always just following along and just trying to see, okay, what were they like? What brought attention? What created success? So a lot of that, I was just paying attention. And even when I would walk into a room, whether it was a classroom, in my house, in other sports, I would walk in and you could almost sense the energy. And I quickly just could understand if somebody was having a good day, if they were having a bad day, if my brothers needed a hug, if my dog was hungry. I was always just trying to pay attention to what did other people need, what was going on. And I think for me, it was always, I loved the little things. And looking for the connections there. And a lot of that, I think, pertains so true today because I'm just so fascinated by it all. And then in addition, I loved cooking. That was at 5 years old, I wanted to be in the kitchen with my grandma. And I loved learning just how you could put together such unique ingredients that seemingly did not come together in whatever fashion that in normal standards it might be. And then you just put it all together and suddenly you have a delicious meal that I would have never thought to put those ingredients together. And so a lot of that has just stood the test of time and realizing, just looking for ways to connect things and make it possible. And then I would also say I was a ballerina before I turned into a swimmer. And how would that all come together? Honestly, I had no clue. I didn't even know that swimming was a sport by the time it was introduced to me. Most teammates that I was around, they start around 3-4 years old. You swim for your life. But I danced until about middle school, until a neighborhood swim mom came up to my mom and was like, can she try the neighborhood swim team? So I did. And from there, that was the moment where I unlocked something within me that I didn't know existed. And that was just this competitive drive that I had. And it was a feeling. It was something I never felt before, but I just knew if I was going to put my mind to something, I was going to achieve it. And I didn't know that was true until I tried it. And swimming did that for me.
That's amazing. And I just kind of want to touch on that a little bit. So you said it unlocked something for you. Did you really identify yourself as a ballerina until that point? And then you were like, I'll just try something new? Or how did that, what did that feel like when you hit that unlock? And maybe did you feel an identity shift towards I'm going to be a swimmer?
Yeah, I remember vividly every time I went to ballet class. I did not understand what I was supposed to do there. I didn't want to be there necessarily. It didn't feel like I belonged. I loved doing the makeup and the leotards, but something about it just didn't resonate. And there was one exercise they always had us do before class really began, and we had to hold this Superman position on our bellies until basically the last person in class rested their legs and arms. And I was determined I was going to hold myself up until the last person dropped. And most oftentimes, my teacher at the time had to tell me, okay, you gotta like come down now because we need to start class. I was determined. I wanted to do that. And I think for me, that was a little bit of, okay, I wanna do something that nobody else in the class wants to do. What does that mean? And then when I switched to swimming, I hopped in the water and it felt like that was my sky. Like I could fly and it was just me in the water. And it truly in that moment, I think it just shifted who I was in my identity overall, like what you just said. It was just an unexpected moment. I didn't know that that's what swimming would do, but I think it helped me realize who I was and what I was capable of.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. You said it was your sky, like it was like you felt at home all of a
It,
sudden. And
yeah.
I think that's amazing. Like you said yes to an opportunity and then it opened doors that maybe at that moment you didn't know would open for you, but that's like an amazing start to the journey.
Mhm.
So then how did you end up at Florida State? You started
Yeah.
swimming, you were like, I'm home, I'm here, I've arrived. How did you end up becoming that elite swimmer at Florida State in college?
Yeah. I would say I almost was protected from being so competitive so early. And so even once I jumped into swimming, it took some time. I went to practice 2 to 3 times a week. I wasn't doing the 5 days a week, 7 days a week that a lot of my teammates were. And it wasn't until about the 10th grade when I all of a sudden just showed up to one swim meet and dropped a ton of time and it caught people's eye. I wasn't, winning the meet or anything, but I was no longer at the bottom or just unrecognized. And then my coach eventually introduced this concept of goal setting to me. And I cannot thank him enough for it because I'm a huge believer that the coaches that we have in our lives and the people that we have, like we all need somebody to believe in us. Somebody who, no matter what, they understand what makes us tick, what we need, but then they also know how to push us in a way that we receive. And this coach for me taught me how to goal set and also created a safe space to be like, put your goal out here, go big, be bold, be brave. And so I wrote down on that sheet of paper that I wanted to qualify for Olympic trials. And that was kind of the shift that I needed to make to go from just average to being great. And I wrote down to the 100th what time I wanted to go. And then I wrote that time on my mirror. And so for over a year, I was training day in and day out, and that time was on my mirror. And by the time the competition came around, I swam that race a total of 4 times in one weekend. And the first, second, and third time, I missed it. First 2 times, total, like missed it by 100. And in swimming, that's like a fingertip. The third time, I missed it by a considerable amount, and I thought this was over. My goal, I didn't meet it. And then my coach came up to me while I was crying in the warm down pool, and he was like, "You better fix yourself because you have one more chance because somebody scratched." I was like, "What are you talking about?" And so again, I shifted and I knew, okay, I need to change my mindset. Like I have another chance. And next thing I know, I hit the wall and I qualified for Olympic trials. And it wasn't until the next morning that I woke up to double check. Like, am I sure? Did that really happen last night? And I looked. And the time that I had written on my mirror for the last year was the exact time to the 100 that I had written and swam that night. And so from there is kind of what propelled me to swim at Florida State. Up until then, it was like maybe I could swim in college, I might walk on, to I can swim wherever I want. And it's basically up to me to figure out what do I need and what am I working toward. So that was kind of the big moment that got me to where that was.
That is like honestly an incredible story. Like the fact that you wrote that on your mirror and it was in front of you the whole time and the role that your coach played too in believing in you, but also giving you a little bit of that like, hey, you got one more shot at this. Like, let's see what you can do here. And just
Absolutely.
that mindset unlock. I love that story. That is so cool. So you you inevitably end up at Florida State. You're there, you swim there for 4 years, or can you kind of go through, like, your timeline there? Because you got your MBA there as well.
Mhm.
So what was your career like
Yes.
at Florida State?
So I swam there for all 4 years. It was a wonderful time. Honestly, the university itself I didn't know what to expect. I thought I was going to swim at a state school because I grew up in North Carolina and that's just all I ever saw. And then this little North Carolina girl went to Florida and honestly never wanted to leave. I loved the sunshine. I got to swim outside every day, every morning, and see the sunrise before most people were awake. And that was just such a rewarding experience. And honestly, besides the swimming, that opportunity to swim in college really gave me the chance to understand who am I, what am I all about, and who am I going to be. And it allowed me to question myself a lot and to realize, okay, swimming will eventually come to an end, and what will that look like? And so even though I did do school for 4 years at Florida State, I left for about 8 to 10 months and worked at Wake Forest for a year, just trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and worked in player development there. And then decided I had a mentor at the time in the ACC office who told me, you should get your master's, don't get it in sports, like get your MBA. That will be something that you can use no matter what. And I remember sitting at the ACC office. I was the only intern sitting there. And I was like, I don't even know if I should be at this table, but I'm going to take this advice because she's clearly going places and I want to go places too. So I made that decision, and Florida State gave me the opportunity to come back and do a 1-year MBA. And so I got to work in athletics during that time. I worked with the dean for a while. And a lot of that experience allowed me to go back and appreciate Florida State in a different way, but then take it for what it was worth and then go take it outside.
Yeah, I want to take a quick little detour too on something you said. Your mentor at the ACC office, she encouraged you to go get your MBA.
Mhm.
I work with a lot of candidates who are maybe just starting to embark on their professional careers here at Shift Group, and they sometimes have questions around like, how do I find a mentor? How important is it to find a mentor? How did you find this mentor, or was it just something that happened organically, like that early in your career?
I was very lucky because this person previously she had worked at Florida State as an intern when I was a student athlete. And then I was always the type of person, as I said earlier, I'm incredibly observant. I'm always watching to see what did the successful people do in their life. I'm looking for, okay, what does this person have that I want? And how can I get that? Or and seeing like, okay, this person was traveling to all of these different cities to go to championship games and create events. Or this person clearly everybody wanted to be around because they made people feel welcome or open. Or this person has started 2 businesses and they get to do all of this. So I'm always looking for what are successful people doing that I'm not and that I can do. And so I kind of just shadowed her almost, and then just leaned on and just asked the questions and tried to understand how did she get to where she was. So it happened somewhat informally, but I think the more that I pursued trying to understand her and her pathway, she started to recognize, okay, she's hungry for this knowledge. She's curious. She wants to know. And maybe that opened the door for her to also feel like, I'm going to pass this along to her. Like she's somewhat already following my path. And so I'm going to pave the way. And I'm also incredibly grateful for that because you don't always get that. And some people of mentors of mine, like they fizzle out because we end up going different paths. And so I think you kind of have to find the people who fit and where you want to go. And it's okay if it changes.
Yeah, I think a common theme when I ask the question about mentors on this show is that it really is an authentically built relationship. I'll just say
Mhm.
that. It's not something that's forced. It's not like, hey, can you be my mentor? It's that observation that you made and then letting that relationship authentically unfold, I think is like it's the key, but putting yourself out there too is super
Yeah.
important in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to trust yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And so you then went on after you got your MBA, you went to South Carolina where you were a mentor of your own sorts to a lot of student
Yeah.
athletes there. Can you talk about what that transition was like going to
Yeah.
work full time after your MBA?
Yeah, it's definitely something I knew I wanted to do. I had somebody who was in that position at South Carolina at Florida State who basically did that job and was almost like a mom to me when I was away from my mom.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do that. I wanted to be that person because she helped me figure out where I wanted to go. And that was my goal. And when I look at that time there, it was an easy transition to an extent of I was so relatable to all of them because I had just been in their shoes. And I have always been the person who I'm incredibly optimistic and I believe the best in anyone and everyone. Like I know like if people are rally behind you, you can achieve great things. And so I wanted to be part of that like cheerleading squad for all of these athletes who came through. And a lot of them, they would just come through with like the same story over and over and over. They look different, different sports, different people, different ways of life, but they all came in with the same core thing of, I don't know what to do with my life and think about it without sports involved. That is just an anomaly to a lot of them. And so it was a lot of trying to figure out, okay, how do we reposition this mindset and recognize it's not life without sport. It's taking what you earned and learned within sport and transitioning that to something that you're also passionate about. Because even for me, leaving swimming, that seemed uncharacteristic. Like I was a water baby through and through in my whole life. And what am I going to do without my hair wet all the time? But it was recognizing, how can I find what I talked about earlier, this like unlocking of a part of me? How can I find that in another way? And so it was a lot of just talking through with them, understanding what were they actually passionate about and what made them good at their sport, and how could we use that for what they actually want to do for their life.
Yeah, that's such a common theme, Caroline. Like hearing you talk about the struggles that your student athletes had,
Yeah.
I had those same struggles. It's like, what does life look like without sport? It's such a daunting part of your life as that time is approaching. Like inevitably, all our careers end,
Yeah.
and so that is such a scary thing that you helped a lot of people work through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm sure like in your experience too, it's like, what am I going to do? And what does this look like? And then we also, I think, oftentimes feel like it has to be linear and it has to be so straightforward. Like you should know. And I think early on in our life, it's always imprinted on us, like the doctors in our lives who know that they want to be a doctor since they were 5, and all of the pressure to know what we want to do at such a young age. And I mean, there's a lot of pressure even to know what university you want to go to. Like that's 4 years of your life. And so there's a lot of pressure on such big decisions that we need to get out of this mindset that it's so rigid, and that, yes, we're going to make this decision, but your first job doesn't have to be your last job. But like, try it, see it, and like use your skills that you've grown as an athlete and lead your way. You don't have to be the best at it, but maybe you can show you are.
Amen. Oh my God. Like you talking about how, oh, doctors, they know what the doctors want to, they know they want to be a doctor from a young age. Like
Yeah.
you just saying all that, I'm just like, yes, nodding along, because I just have such vivid memories of being before college. Like, I don't know what I want to do with my life after volleyball. And I don't know it's so, I think as a society, we have to do away with the notion that our careers do need to be linear. And every step you take needs to be so calculated. I think if there's one thing that I learned from talking to all the guests on my show so far, is that you can say yes to an opportunity and quickly find out that maybe it's not for you. And that's still a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Like it might feel like, oh my God, I made a wrong decision. This isn't the right role for me or the right internship or whatever it is. Well, guess what? Now you know.
Yeah.
And we can stop putting so much pressure on ourselves
Yeah.
and we can just choose another route. So I just, that like so deeply resonated with me. So I just got really excited about that.
I love that. But I mean, honestly, like we need to take the time to think about that, because a lot of times we can feel like we're stuck on a path and we don't have to be.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not linear. You can walk off the path if you need to.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's okay. I think a lot of us feel like if we make the wrong decision and we jump off of this path, like what if I made the wrong decision? And then you can be filled with regret. But I think either way, like if you don't try, you'll never know.
Exactly. Exactly. You'll never know. You'll always wonder, and you can always change your mind. Like
Yeah.
dealing with so many young athletes and veterans who are just transitioning into the workforce. I had a conversation with a young woman last week who and this was maybe a month ago that we had this exact conversation, but she was like, I just don't want to make the wrong choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I just tried to reassure her, like, there's no wrong choice here. It's just a choice.
Yeah.
You can always make another one.
Yeah.
So
I would even say like a lot of even my career from leaving South Carolina, it was this recognition of, okay, where I was is not where I have to stay. And this did happen during COVID when I decided to leave college athletics, but it was almost hypocritical in a sense of me working at South Carolina, because I still didn't fully understand who I wanted to be and where I wanted to go. I started different side ventures of a podcast and different things. And it was kind of me trying to figure out what was I going to do? What else? Because honestly, as COVID hit, I realized I could do my job in my sleep. I realized a lot of it, if I wasn't face to face with athletes, like a lot of my administrative tasks, I could get done very quickly. I've always been very efficient and just I can see from point A to point B and then get there as fast as I can. And so sitting at home during COVID and nobody really was talking, nobody was in person, I thought, I want to see what else is out there. I want to figure out what else is possible. And so I decided to set a goal to meet one new person every week. And how do you do that in COVID? You reach out to people on LinkedIn. So I sent out a bunch of messages and tried to meet people who worked at Target, at Pinterest, people who were project managers for different firms. I just wanted to learn about all of those careers that nobody ever teaches us about because they're not broadly advertised in business school. They're not talked about as a fifth grader, when the firefighter comes in and tells you about his job. Like they don't tell you about these other
Yeah.
jobs. And so eventually I fell into meeting somebody in the consulting space and learned everything I needed to know about consulting to start out. And lo and behold, here I am working as a consultant. And 5 years ago, I would have never guessed that.
That is a really great segue because I did want to talk about that. So you reached out, I love the idea to reach out to one new person a week, especially during COVID. Like that is so challenging and you were still putting yourself out there.
Mm-hmm.
So then you ended up in consulting at Grant Thornton. And as you're telling your story, I mean, I can already see a lot of parallels as to why you were good at this job. Like you say, very observant. You can see from point A to point B. You can just observing what's around you and then coming up with a different idea for what you're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to just touch a little bit on your work at Grant Thornton. And I guess maybe some skills that you developed as an athlete that help you in your current role.
Yeah. I would say more than anything as an athlete, you learn to be agile. You learn that on competition day, things are not always going to go to plan. You can control what you can control, but there are a lot of variables that you can't. You can't control if there are other swimmers who hit you in the lane. You can't control if they delay the timing of things. There are a lot that you are just totally out of your scope for you. And through that in consulting, so often, every time you're working with different clients, they all look different. No day with a client looks the same and no client ever looks the same. And so I've learned that I have to be resilient, agile to that and recognize, okay, how I approach this client is going to look different to how I would approach a different one. And then also to that point, being observant. And it's listening a lot more than I'm speaking at first because I have to know that before I step forward, I need to listen to a coach who's going to tell me why this practice is important, why I need to do a certain technique. And same thing with clients. I need to understand what are their ins and outs and special nuances that other clients like this don't have. And recognizing they're not all the same. And oftentimes clients, they know what they need. They just don't know exactly how to get there and what that looks like. And sometimes even what they think they need isn't what they want and what they actually necessarily should have. And so my job is I just need to listen and absorb. And then basically show them, I understand what you're saying. I understand what you need. And here's the path forward that I think will get you there. But a lot of that came from sport and always taking a step back and understanding, okay, clearly I haven't dropped time in the last year. I need to make an adjustment. So I need to step back and look at, is it nutrition? Is it my technique? Yeah. Is it the type of suit that I'm wearing? And recognizing what is that lever that I can pull to make a change. And so because I had to do that so often in swimming, I mean, it's hundredths of a second you're dealing with a business. It's okay, look at these different functions. How do they all come together to make this thing work?
Yep. So for someone who's listening to you explain, all those qualities about yourself that make you great at what you do now, somebody who says, I am agile, I am a great listener, I am resilient, I am creative, I can see from point A to point B, what, I guess, and they have no idea maybe what you do as a consultant. I guess the question I'm asking is like, what is a quick elevator pitch that you can give someone listening if they have those skills? Like, what do you do as a consultant so that they can start to put the pieces together and maybe explore that path?
Yeah, I would say in the shortest way I can describe it is you're basically coming in as an extension of a company. You were basically hired on as an employee of, say, Coca-Cola or Pepsi. and you come in there and they're asking you to join their team and help them solve a problem. So they say that they are having trouble getting product to a certain location. You come in there and try to understand who all is a part of getting things from point A to point B, and then how can I figure out how can they work better together, what's missing, what can we improve, and asking lots of questions. I think that's the one thing I probably omitted in understanding and explaining consulting is being able to ask the good questions that target and give you the actual answers. You can pose the typical how, the who, what, when, where, how, but you're not going to get it. Like it's asking why, and it's asking it 5 times in a row until you get the actual why.
That's interesting. I feel like
Mhm.
there's a lot of parallels there for some sales skills too that
Oh,
we teach
absolutely.
here at Shift Group.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Well,
I
yeah.
want to shift gears a little bit because we don't have a ton of time left, and I want to talk about your podcast.
Mhm.
I can also see like all of your skills that you've laid out definitely make for a wonderful podcast host. Very observant,
Yeah.
asking a lot of great questions, super curious. So, what really inspired you to start the Unwritten podcast, and how has it evolved since your launch?
Yeah. I would say, growing up, you're in a classroom and a teacher asks a question and nobody's answering. Or same thing when a coach would be speaking to the entire team and nobody speaks up or nobody responds. Anytime that would happen, I felt a dissonance in myself. And I was like, I feel like I should say something, but I don't know. And through my time as an athlete, I learned two of the most important things. One was I have a voice and I need to use it. And the second thing was, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And I look back on that when I was at trials, I completely failed and I got out of the pool and recognized I have trained so much for this. What would I do if I weren't afraid? And I would have gone in and had a better race. I would have trusted my training. And so with those two things, I have since brought that in. Okay, I've always felt like I need to say something, but I listen so much. How can I figure out how to turn that into something to speak and to share what I have to say? And so that's when the podcast kind of came to be. I realized I do have things to say. I want to share them. I also want to empower other people's voices to give them something to say. And one of my biggest things is I've always felt like I needed to say something, but I didn't know how or in what medium. And there's this thought leader that talks about the importance of practicing out loud. And as athletes, all of our practice is behind closed doors. Nobody ever sees it. And so the only feedback we get are from our coaches. And so when you get to a competition day, like that's when everybody sees. That's when the crowd goes wild or they tell you they don't like what they see. And so for me, this podcast is a way of practicing out loud. And it's a way of learning how to have conversations, learning how to explore different types of stories and being able to bring that to the surface to be able to add value to people who are listening. Because honestly, the best feedback is the feedback you can get from live things, even like this, and seeing, okay, who's watching, who's paying attention, what are people saying? Are they not paying attention? And if they're not listening, that's just as good a feedback as any.
Hi.
And so that's a lot of where the podcast originated from.
I love the concept of practicing out loud. I think it's hard to put yourself out there, but I feel like it just as you were speaking, I was thinking like you prove yourself to yourself each
Mhm.
time that
You
you
do.
do that and you put yourself out there and you practice out loud and take the feedback with grace. I personally love it. I find that super inspiring.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess, did you have any initial hesitation when you started creating content? And if so, how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I was terrified. I never want the spotlight on me. I never wanted attention on me when I was little. I always would just be tomato red in the face anytime I was the center of attention. I just would withdraw. Even to this day, if attention comes on me, I kind of hide my face. But I had an incredible teammate of mine who turned into my financial advisor. And he basically, we were talking through my goals one day, and this all goes back to goal setting. And he was like, what if you just started to post every day, even just on LinkedIn? What if you were to turn that into, okay, every now and then you post a video? And even just his small ounce of belief in me moved mountains for me. And I think that goes back even to the coach that I had. Like if you feel like somebody truly understands you and encourages you and pushes you in a way that you feel like, okay, I can't fail. Like somebody's supporting me, somebody wants to see me succeed. Like that's what really pushed me over to the edge. And so I would tell even the audience here, like, find what that is for you. And if you're afraid, like find somebody that you can lean into and trust. And even if it's just one person who listens, reacts, or whatnot, that's more than it could be. And I have to say, like, more oftentimes than not, the lives we reach are more than we will ever know, because the ones that we do meet, they often multiply into so many more that we will never meet. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's so like, even if you're impacting one person, the reach could be exponential beyond that. And that just kind of reminded me, I've heard someone say, like, if you have a podcast or you're posting content on Instagram or TikTok, and maybe you only get 50 views on it total, you would be amazed, though. You would be pumped if you were in a room with those 50 people and talked to them. Like, that's
Absolutely.
insane. But for some reason, just because it's like only 50 people on LinkedIn or online or Instagram, or even less than that, 20 people, you're like, "Oh, it didn't do well." It's like, that would be insane to be able to talk to
Mhm.
that many people and reach that many people at once.
Yeah, yeah. I think we can easily get caught up in this like virtual world that we have, where we have so much access to see things. And of course, in the feeds that we have, we're going to see the famous people, we're going to see the newscasters, and those are always going to have high numbers, but that's their job. That's their primary job. And if you want that to be your primary job, like eventually you will get there. You put in the time, you put in the work, and that's what will happen. But I don't think we can ever underestimate the impact that we make by the small things that we do, because even as I said in the beginning, the little things are everything.
Yeah, agreed. What episode should guests tune into of the Unwritten
Mhm.
podcast, and where can they find you?
That is a great question. I recently had a wonderful guest named Ivana, who is somewhat of a personal coach and mentor for a lot of business leaders. And she really helps listeners rethink about, when you're facing a problem, a situation, how can you reframe it and rethink it in a way that allows you to move past it and succeed? So she honestly had some wonderful advice. It was a really fruitful conversation. So you can check it out on Spotify. And there are also links always on my LinkedIn page.
Amazing. I'm gonna throw that link to this one in the chat, or like in the comments after we're done here today. So listeners can just go to the comments and find that one.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, okay, we are way over. I just realized it's 1:36. So
Oh dear.
I'll just have you wrap up with a couple of final thoughts, I guess. Um, if you could just share maybe the best career advice you've received, what would
Yeah.
that be?
I would say for anyone, it is to don't be afraid to put a stake in the ground. A lot of times, the first idea or the first thought or the first just way forward often sticks or becomes the main thing. And a lot of people can be afraid to put a stake in the ground, say what they want to do and whatnot, but don't be afraid. A lot of times, your ideas, it's like when you're taking a test, like your first answer is often the right answer. So trust yourself, and you never know what might be possible.
Thank you so much, Caroline. This was awesome. It's always a good sign when we go way over time.
Yeah.
I just, yeah, get caught up in the chat. So, thank you again so much. This was wonderful. I really appreciate your time, and I know the listeners do too. So, can I encourage them to connect with you on LinkedIn? Obviously, connect with you or follow you on Spotify. Follow the podcast. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, feel free to reach out. Always happy to chat and connect. And thank you, Jordan. This has been a true joy to be a part of this, and I love seeing all that you're doing with this space. So it's incredibly encouraging and lifting up so many people.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to have met you and to have had you on today. So, thank you everyone for tuning in. I will see you soon. We'll be doing a little break next week, so won't have a guest next week, but we'll be back in mid-February. So, thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you.